Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm looking at NoInputMixer, a really cool new app by Igor Vasiliev. And I've got 5 copies of any Igor Vasiliev app to give away to my followers, subscribers, beloved viewers, whatever you want to call them. I've got 2 copies for YouTube followers, 1 for Twitter followers, 1 for Insta, 1 for Threads. Details are in the pinned YouTube comment, and the winners will be picked at random 2 days after release of this video. Now, what am I going to talk about in this video? Oh, one more thing to mention first as well before I forget. I just want to really say a big thank you to Igor for agreeing to do a little voice call with me. Turned into a fairly long one, actually, where he let me ask him questions directly about the app. It saved me a lot of time, and it has also made sure that this video is going to be a lot better than it would have been otherwise. Because I only found out last night that this app was coming out today. And yeah, I really wanted to get a video out in time for release because I think it will be extremely helpful. Honestly, the manual is a bit of a hard slog to get through. I do love this, though. This shows what the architecture basically of one of the channels, and there is 7 channels in the mixer. But yeah, apart from that, there are no illustrations and stuff, so it's kind of it's a bit of a slog going through it. So yeah, thanks a lot for that, Igor. Really appreciate it. And so now I'll just mention quickly what I'm going to cover in this video. So first, we'll talk a little bit about what no input mixing is. And I'll just mention also, by the way, that this app is a single purchase for iPhone, M1 Mac or higher, and iPad. Okay, so buy it once and you can use it on any of those platforms as an AUV3. And, you know, an ever-growing number of desktop DAWs do allow you to use AUV3s in them. So we'll talk about what no input mixing is, and I'll just mention that this can be also used as an FX app, in which case it's no longer a no input mixer. It's basically just working as a mixer with a cool effects rack that has, you know, a delay, flanger, chorus, and so on, but it's no longer a no input mixer. But, you know, you've got nice filters and EQs. You've got different noise sources and different preamp and op-amp tube models and so on. So it's cool that you can do that. But this video will mainly be focusing on using it as a no-input mixer. So we'll talk about what that is, and we'll talk about some advantages that this app could have over no-input mixers, hardware ones, not just in terms of, you know, not having to faff around with cables and stuff, but in terms of features and flexibility that is just not there in any existing hardware mixer. So yeah, anybody interested in experimental sound design, anybody interested in feedback, is going to love this. And it's great for, you know, making weird soundscapes, weird sound effects, atmospheric stuff for horror movies, sci-fi, that kind of thing, drones, just weird clicks and glitches and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, we'll talk a bit about that, and then I'll walk you through the interface. And that part, I genuinely really think that anybody who has this app, I think watching this video start to end at least once is going to be incredibly good use of your time. Because not only is the manual a bit of a slog to get through, there are lots of little things that can trip you up in the app. Things like not getting any sound, just a lot of things that you would miss as well, that you might just think, for example, is a label, but it's actually a button, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really useful video. Okay, so let's first just look. So when we, let me pull this out, and so here, open it as an instrument in the AUM. So here we've got a channel, and here's an instrument node. And if you don't know how to use AUM, I've done a video on it called Almost Everything You Need to Know About AUM. Go to Audio Unit Extension, and then we can just search NoInputMixer, but I have it here anyway up at the top because I was just using it. So when we open it, it will open like this on the init preset, unless you have ticked this, in which case, even when you open a fresh instance of the app, it will open at whatever state the last instance of the app you used, even if it was in a totally different session or whatever state that was in. But okay, normally we wouldn't have that box ticked. This is the normal way that apps usually work in hosts and AUM, right? You open up a new instance and it opens up in the init patch. You open up an instance that you were using in the session before and you saved the session, then it will open up identical to the last state that it was in before you saved the session, right? So we open up and it'll be factory like this. So we can click here and that'll open up this preset menu, and I'm not going to go through any of the different functions there. You can read about that in the manual. There's a lot more important stuff to talk about. But another thing we can do is we can double click here, and then it brings up this kind of quick access preset menu, and we can just click on something there. So let's click on something, and a lot of the time when you click on things, there won't be any sound. And the first thing to try in that case is this level button over on the right. So just bring that up. This is a lovely one, isn't it? Okay, so let me just put that up nice and loud just for a quick minute. So I don't know who this Robert Dowell guy is, but I'm really glad he made some presets for the app because they're really cool. So let's just leave this one running kind of low level in the background, and we'll talk about what no input mixing is. So look, here we toggle between a single channel view and a multi-view. So when we're in the multi-view, here we have what looks like a typical mixer, okay? So no input mixer, that is defined by its opposition to the normal way that people use mixers, which is exactly that they have to put some input into them, right? So let's say you've got a band or whatever, okay, that's playing live. They're going to have a mixer there. And let's say, the vocalist's mic gets plugged into channel 1 input, and the, first guitar goes into channel 2, second guitar, channel 3, bass guitar, channel 4, drums, channel 5, for example. And then we just use the mixer to, change the volume. We'd have maybe a gain control, which is different, of course, right? Gain and a level. Let's not confuse those. And if you're not sure, you can check online what the difference is. And yeah, we would have things like a panning effect, and we might have sends where we could control, for example, how much reverb was going to each channel. Maybe we want more reverb on the vocals than on the drums or whatever. or, you know, how much delay is going to each channel or whatever, right? But a no input mixer is very different from that. It's very experimental. So basically a no input mixer works like this. Now for this, let's jump to the single view, and let's just mute everything except channel 1. Okay, and what we've got is, okay, so I can't remember, I haven't actually looked up about who invented this technique. I know it's heavily associated with a Japanese artist, and I can't remember his name now either. But basically, whatever, at some point, someone got the idea, okay, instead of doing things that traditional way, what happens if I just take the noise, right, that, you know, any analog gear will always have some kind of noise floor. So what if I use the preamp, okay, to, you know, boost the level of that noise? And let me just turn that off there. So, okay, so at the moment here, we have no feedback, okay? So all we've got is noise. But then imagine that we take the output of that channel, right? And we plug a cable into it. That would usually be coming out the back of the mixer, right? And then we take that cable, whoops, down here, and we plug it in at the front into the channel 1, whoops, into the channel 1 input. Hang on, I still get confused by this. Okay, so here, we plug it into the channel 1 input, right? So now we have a feedback loop, right? So let's hear that now with feedback. Okay, so that is the non-fed back, just output of the mixer. And this is what it would sound like if we take that output and connect the cable to it and then plug the cable into the input. Now, we could also, if the mixer has an FX rack, we could add some effects to it. Let's take that format, that's pretty cool. Okay, and then we could decide, will the feedback loop happen pre-effects, i.e. before adding the effects? Or will the effects be part of the feedback loop? And that's what's happening here. And then we get a more complex sound. And then we can, you know, sculpt that sound with various things, different EQs and so on. And we can add reverb and whatever, okay? And so if we do that, and that's just the most basic setup, right? I mean, we could also have more complex setups where, for example, we feed the whole, you know, mix output, right, of all the channels together. We could feed that back into a single channel, for example. And there's just all kinds of possibilities, right? So let's go on and just listen to a few more examples. Now, I just want to flick through these quickly, but I'll just point out that, you know, if you just let these run and do their own thing, even without tweaking anything, a lot of the time you'll get very interesting changes that happen over time, either gradually or suddenly. So if you were performing, you know, you could mute different channels and then bring them in. Now, I haven't looked at how this one was set up, but it seems that, yeah, these other channels are not set up to be producing any noise. Or, yeah, look, see the noise is turned down. They're not set up to be making a feedback loop, but now it is. So we'll look more at how to do that in a minute. Okay, so that's just a couple of examples. This video could get really long. I really have to try my best to control myself in terms of how much time I spend on any given feature. So now you know basically what no input mixing is. Excuse me. Let's talk first about a few things that this app can do that wouldn't be possible with a hardware no input mixing setup. So first of all, we could, in this app, choose different models for the preamp, okay? And we could also choose different types of noise, like for example, that Geiger noise that we just had. You know, you would never get that from any hardware analog mixer. They would just make white noise, okay? Here we can choose different op-amp models. So that comes in, if we go into the manual and we look at the signal flow chart here, we can see that here we have the preamp, right? So that's just coming in, you know, after the noise, right? And the gain, then we have the preamp, okay, tuba preamp. And again, remember we have some different models there. And then we've got the overload protection circuit, which basically adds a sort of glitchy type effect. But in the in an actual analog mixer, that's not something you would be able to control. It wouldn't be a knob. It would just be something built into the circuitry that, you know, if you maybe, I'm not exactly sure, but I think, you know, maybe if you increase the gain a lot or something, or maybe, yeah, if you increase the gain a lot, should be, for according to this chart, I would imagine, because it's not about level, right? Because level's coming after that. So if you increase the gain a lot, then this overload protection circuit would kick in and you would get a kind of glitchy sound. But here in the app, you're actually able to like adjust that like a knob, so you can dial in the amount. That's really cool. Really cool. So yeah, you wouldn't have a knob like that on a real analog mixer. And also here you can choose your tube saturation, linear or saturated, which would give more complex harmonics and distortion and so on. So you hear there the overprotection thing. see that this one is very important for maybe dialing in tones. Not sure exactly why that is. I mean, I've never used a mixer for any kind of experimental purposes myself. I've only ever used it in the most conventional way, just plugging my guitar and, you know, microphone for my voice into it or whatever. Let's jump on and get a different preset. So we'll go over the interface. And I'm just going to turn the volume down a minute and try and go over this really very quickly. So the most important thing to pay attention to really is that here we're toggling between a view of the effects and the channel view. And then here we're toggling between single and multi-view. And so multi-view we just looked at, and that's just this, you know, typical kind of mixer layout. Except that what's not typical here is this send, well, it's not send actually, but the button here below this level, and also look the fact that we can toggle that. Now I just want to say I don't like the UI in this regard. I think it's bad design. There's nothing that lets you know that that is a button. So look at this, for example. It's just, okay, it's black text on a white rectangle. Now we go to the mixer. Now here we have black text on an identical white rectangle. And this, when I click on it, nothing happens. This is just a label. But here, when I click on this, this is not just a label, this is a button. And how is the user supposed to know that? So talk to Igor about that, and he agrees that, you know, there should be something, like maybe some kind of symbol or whatever, that shows you is any given thing that you can interact with, these things that look like labels, are they actually a button? Well, there should be something there to show you that. So yeah, that he said will come in a future update. So that'll be great. So yeah, pay attention there. So here, okay, here we're switching to the amp view, where we have the amp type and the gain and noise stuff, and we can choose here the noise type, and choose here the op amp, right? So this one is the preamp. And then we have this, you know, the limit and overprotection and the tube type, the model. And this mix off and on, I honestly just actually can't remember offhand what that does, so you can check it in the manual. Remember, the manual is accessible with that question mark. So then if we click through to level, we've just got that much simpler view, okay? So this is something very important to remember. In multi-view, remember that you can toggle these, and remember that these are important for selecting your input sources, and we'll talk about that a bit more very soon. Now then over here, we've got our output one, and here this, when we press it, it doesn't do anything, right? It's just a label. But this EQ thing, okay, this is pressable. So here now, this is set as shelf. So we have a choice between cutoff and shelf. So if it's on cutoff, then here we're controlling the frequency of the high and low pass filters. And here we're just controlling the Q, is it wide or narrow? And then here we can change it to shelf EQ, and then we're changing the gain with this. And again, we're choosing between narrow and wide. And so now, magically, this is no longer just a label, it's a goddamn button. But now it's just a label, it's not a button. So like really need some visual indicators on these. Okay, so that's the multi-mixer view. And then if we click in here, we get to the single view. And now here, there's a lot that I like about the way the UI has been done here. I really prefer it to Igor's last app, Glitchscaper. Glitchscaper, I felt you had to do a lot of diving around if you wanted to tweak a particular channel. But here, you know, we get access to all the important controls for channels, and even more, in fact, in this channel view, because this single channel view also has some element of a mixer view, because here we can see all the channels, all 7 channels. We can mute individual channels. We can see the level of different channels, and we can quickly adjust their levels and maybe, you know, bring down things that are in the red and so on. Now here is, which this is very important to understand and to pay attention to. So here, this is highlighted black. It means that these controls are for channel 3. Now over here, the stuff is all related to output. So this is very important to understand, right? Because you've got, you know, a couple of different EQ sections or filter sections in here, but those are just controlling the EQ or filter for channel 3. Over here, these are, you know, a global EQ or filter thing related to the master, the output, okay? So that's really important to understand. And then another thing is if we click on app, this brings up some things. By the way, I also wish that these, when you clicked on them, that these would change. I mean, you can see what they are over here, but a lot of people wouldn't even really notice that, I think. So I would like to see that added to the UI as well. These, you know, changing their color or something when they're selected. But anyway, if we go to app, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll look at this one though, alternative interface in the single channel view. So let's close that and go back out. So now, if you see now over here, this is all different. Here we've got like a slot for FX3, because in the app, the most typical way to use the FX, let's just say as like insert effects, then if we just choose FX3 as an insert effects, normally that's basically just going to be affecting channel 3's signal. Now there are more complex ways we can do things. But yeah, so that's why here in this alternative view, we can see the most important effect controls for effect slot 3 and for effect slot 8. Why? Because effect slot 8 can basically work as an insert effect for the master channel. Okay, so again, just look at this. So this is the alternative view. Okay, we got the amp, we got these 2 EQ things, we got send and stuff here, and then a level and panning for that channel, and then we got this stuff over here. And let's just pop back to the default view. So see here, all this part is the same, but here it has changed. We don't see those effects in detail. Instead, so there is a small difference over here actually, maybe, yeah. So instead here, we've just got basically the level control for effect 3. And then over here, we've got the level control for effect 8. So if we pop back to the alternative interface, see here, right, there's a space because that little just level control for effect 3. Instead, over here, we got something much more sophisticated, not just level, but everything, the effect type, and then the controls for that particular effect. So these things change depending on what effect type we choose here. And then whether it's high res or lo-fi. Lo-fi just, reducing the bit depth and rate. And here, controlling the input, and we'll talk about this more later, and the output of the effect. And we can also just bypass the effect. So that's not like muting the channel, right? That's just bypassing the effect. Okay, so that's the alternate view, but for now I'll just turn it back to the default, as that's what most people will see when they open the app. So yeah, so we've got our single view. Again, preamp type, gain, noise type, op amp model, this limit control, overprotection control, tube model type, a mute button. EQ can be cutoff or shelf. And here we have our send amounts, and we have 2 sends, send 1 or send 2. And we have 2 returns, return 1 and return 2. And then here our level for the effect. And then here we can have peak, notch, or pass. So here it's a peak EQ, and okay, we're controlling the frequency. And then here, for example, it's a notch EQ, and again, controlling the frequency, and here's the width for it. And so on, okay, a band pass. Okay, so here again, now this, I think, yeah, we need to talk about. This is so important. So for any given channel, and we mentioned this a bit earlier in the video, but we need to go into more detail. So the most common setups probably would be either this insert pre or insert post, and we talked about the difference between those. So when we choose pre, we will get, hang on, let me just make sure I'm not going to get these mixed up. Post, okay, yeah, so when we choose post, any effect that we apply will just be applied after the feedback loop. And when we choose this, any effect that we apply will be added before the feedback loop, so it will be part of the feedback loop, and we get complex, very much more complex feedback. Now, input left and right, this would be useful if we're using it as an effects, right? So we have a synth, we play something in, and then, set it up so that it's going to process the left stereo channel or the right stereo channel or whatever, okay? So that's what that is. Now here, we can use the mixer, okay? So the master level basically for all of the channels. We can use that as our output to feed back in to the feedback for that channel. Or here we can use the send one amounts that are coming from, you know, any channel that has send one activated, then basically that output will go back in to make the feedback loop. And again, here we can use the return knobs. They're on the other here, or we can have none. So none means there will be no feedback, but we could still have noise, and we could amp that noise. Okay, so you know, you don't need to have every channel feeding back into itself. Maybe some of them you might want to use to take external inputs. I'm just checking, by the way, does this have multi-out? No, it doesn't. These are just some other apps that I'm using. Is there any multi-out for this? Nah, it doesn't look like there's multi-out. Okay, anyway, yeah, so this is really, really, really important. And if you want some really experimental stuff, play around with the mix ones here, where you're feeding back all the output of all the different channels into a particular channel or several particular channels. It could get really crazy. Now, again, we'll tweak things, we'll listen to things later on, okay? First, I just want to go through methodically without interruptions the interface. Okay, so yeah, our shelf, our cutoff EQ here, our return knobs, FX8, and so on and so on. Now here we choose our convolution reverb type and the reverb amount, and then here the overall output. So again, some presets you're going to have to go in and play around with them before you actually get any sound. So we could take the reverb down there and have it totally dry. So that's channel 3, that's the only one at the moment making any noise. Let's click through to the effects section. Seems like a good opportunity to look at effects. So at the moment, it's got the bit crush effect. Okay, and there's the level for that. Now here, the effect is just being used as an insert effect, or we could control it with the send knobs. So if we chose that, the amount of the effect would be controlled by the send knob on the single channel page over there. Here, the input for it would be the previous slot, so FX2. Okay, so that's another important thing to pay attention to. So there you're hearing the difference between the high res and the lo-fi one. Now let's so that's a delay. flanger. Now, how this sounds will depend so let's choose here. Okay, yeah, okay, right, so I was thinking there we didn't have much happening. This is the thing, yeah, you know, you can really get tripped up with things in this app. So, okay, let's just, let's choose this, okay, pre and post. So let's listen to the effects post. So we're going to be getting a lot more complexity there. Okay, now we'll have a listen to a few more presets and maybe tweak a few things. First, I want to mention another cool thing. So we already went into the settings menu, but before we only looked at a couple of things in the app tab. Just want to mention that MIDI 1 you can use to set up MIDI Learn, but personally I never really use MIDI Learn because I'm so used at this point to just using the internal AUM way of assigning things. But anyway, you know that it's there, and if you want to learn how to use it, just go and take a look at the manual if it's not clear to you. But what I really want to look at is this MIDI 2 thing, and I'm not going to look at files. You can check this out for yourself in the manual. It's something I haven't used and probably won't use. MIDI 2, this has a couple of really cool things that I want to explain. So let's just close this for a second and go back to the multi-view. So, I mean, it can be really nice to use external controllers to control your iPad apps. It can be really nice, but actually only in theory, because in reality, a lot of the time, it's a freaking pain in the ass. Why? Because you don't have like mutual recognition between the app and the external FX. Okay, so like let's say for example let's say I set up my MIDI controller so that one of the faders on that is controlling this fader here. So let's just imagine now that I'm using my MIDI controller. I mean, I am actually using the mouse, but just pretend that I'm using my MIDI controller. So I drag this up here, okay, and I leave it there. Well, let's imagine I save this session, but then I go and open another AUM session, and I also use my external MIDI controller in that, and you know, I play around with all the different slides and whatever, sliders or faders or knobs or whatever, or buttons. If I then reopen this session and I get the same MIDI controller, well, you know, maybe now maybe the app is set here, but for example, now maybe in that MIDI controller, it's set down here. So what happens when I first start trying to tweak that with my external MIDI controller, you know, I just do something like really drastic and radical, and it often sounds really bad. So that's where these things come in. So we have two modes that are useful for dealing with this problem. So one is this scaling mode, and one is pickup mode. And I'm just going to close this again to talk to you about what they actually do. So let's say, for example, in the app, wait a second. So let's say in the app, this is set as that, and my controller happens to be set down here. Now let's say I grab my controller and I just move it up a little tiny bit. What this will do if it's set to scaling mode is that it will basically do like a kind of crossfade, so that we don't get a sudden, you know, by me moving my MIDI controller when it's set down here, I won't get a sudden jump in values. Instead, the change will happen a bit more slowly. So that's one kind of hack, basically. And then the other one, the pickup mode, the way that works is also quite clever. So again, imagine that this slider in the app is set up here, this fader, and then here on my MIDI controller, my fader is set down here. Now imagine on my MIDI controller, I start moving that fader up. Well, when it's in pickup mode, it won't do anything. It'll just completely ignore what I'm doing with the MIDI controller until I bring the MIDI controller up to the same value as here. And then once I've done that, they will kind of sync together. And then when I use my MIDI controller to drag down, it'll bring the level of that down. And my MIDI controller will now be controlling this as normal. Okay, so that is pretty cool. Let's change this one. Okay, yeah, let's just get a lower tone. So I want to look and see, let's just do a very quick review of things and see if there's anything that I've forgotten. So we talked about the preset system, and we mentioned that clicking here will work differently from if you double click, okay? And we didn't bother going into other aspects of the preset system, but that's an important thing to pay attention to. Really important to, you know, maybe have a look at this and familiarize yourself with things. I think it really helps to understand the app. And just, yeah, we've got the manual in general. Now, by the way, you can also zoom, which is nice. But what you can't do is export the manual as a PDF from within the app. That would be nice. But I guess the manual will be on Igor's website. I'm just going to bring this down. And so then remember here that we do have these 4 different tabs. So explore them and check what they are in the manual for the ones that we didn't cover. But if you remember, I did say definitely 2 at least that you should really know about here and understand is this restore last state option and this alternative interface in the single channel view. And I'm not going to go over them again because I've already talked about them. It's just a reminder that we looked at those and they're important, and that we have the MIDI learn system in here in MIDI 1, and then in MIDI 2 we have this very cool scaling mode or pickup mode choice for when you're using external controllers. We talked about you know, the overall concept of no input mixing, and we talked about some of the advantages that this app has over hardware no input mixing setups. We looked at how you might well be confused at times by what is a button and what is a label, but always remember that these ones up here, you can always toggle these top ones. And then with these ones, you're just going to have to get used to what it toggles and what doesn't. I think one thing that we didn't really look at, did we, was if we, and no, I think maybe we did actually, yeah. So remember that for the channels, when you have this level thing, it's just a very simple setup. But if you click on amp, you get more control, you know, just quick access to some of those important parameters like the tube types and yeah, the noise type, noise amount, and this limit and over pro. So, you know, even if you just stayed within this, you know, mixer multi-view, there's a lot that you could do. And remember that you can play around with the different reverb types and so on. Remember that, you know, muting channels is something that will be very useful for live performance. And then remember that we can click here to see the FX. And remember that, you know, we do have a lot of FX types, but remember also that how they sound will really depend on how we have things set up for the channels. For example, are the effects going after the feedback loop or before it, so that they become part of the feedback loop, right? So that's really important. Now remember these here, yeah, these are just labels, they're not buttons. Remember that you've got lo-fi or high res. Remember also that it's very important to look at and understand the differences between the input choices and output choices for the effects, and also that we can bypass them. Then on the single view page, remember that we do to some extent also have that very simplified ability to control levels of other channels. And that is really, really, really nice design. I love that. And we can also mute the other channels from there. So remember that, it's brilliant. But do also remember that it's really important to pay attention to which channel is selected at any given time in this view. And, you know, I wonder if that could be implemented a bit better. I feel that a lot of users using the app for the first time might just not really notice. I mean, it's obvious once you know it, but when you don't, you just might not notice that one of these things is covered black and, or sorry, colored black, and why that is. But yeah. So yeah, remember that anytime we're tweaking stuff here, we're tweaking channel 1. If we want to change channel 2, then we've got to press here and then play around with this. Also remember that this part here is for the output, okay, not for the channel, that's for the master. Okay, so here, channel 2 controls. Now click here. Now here is channel 3 controls. Here, these are the master controls. I click here. These are still the master controls, nothing to do with channel 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, okay? But also remember that we have that alternative interface view, which some people might prefer, where here we have more detailed control of the effect slot that corresponds to the channel and the number 8 effect slot, because that one can be an insert for the master thing. So if we just want to apply, say, a delay effect to everything, then we would do it in FX slot 8. If we want to apply chorus to everything, then this is where we would do that, right? So that's also really nice that it has that. Going back to the single view, remember that if you open a preset and you don't have sound, you really, really need to look at what's going on in here. I mentioned earlier in the video, so now is a point maybe to just remember a few of the weaknesses of the app. So one thing I just find very weird, and I mentioned it earlier, is that by default, things like the init preset open with this set to input, and that just seems very strange to me, since the whole thing is you know, being marketed as NoInputMixer, and you know, people are not going to get sound in the init preset unless they change this to one of these things, especially, I mean, they might not get anything, you know, if they choose mix, if the mix volumes are down, if they choose send, if those are down completely, they won't get anything, any feedback. If, you know, this is, if the return knobs are down, they won't get any feedback, and so on. So these are going to be your most reliable choice for if you just want to do feedback and, you know, play around with pre and post effect settings. Remember also, if you're getting no sound, that you really want to look at, you know, whether this has been turned up and whether any of these are turned up. Because, you know, if all of these are down, even if you turn this up, you're not going to get any sound. And if this is down, even if you play around with these, you're not going to get any sound. So let's just, before we finish, let's just take like one preset. And I really hope, just right before I finish, that this doesn't balls up in some way. But I've now set that, and okay, this is called channel 7 insert delay post. Okay, so the feedback is set to include the FX. Now here, channel 2 is selected, but let's see. Okay, so I bring that one up. It is making noise, yeah. But we didn't hear anything because we didn't have the master level up. Okay, good. So that's set to that insert. Now see, like here, this is not set up for a feedback loop. So all we're getting here is just noise. And we can add gain. Okay, so just incredibly important to pay attention anytime you open up a preset. Pay attention to whether these are activated. If not, start, you know, slowly activating these. Pay attention to what the input source is here. Pay attention to what the level is here. You know, pay attention to whether gain and noise are on, and pay attention to the master output. So yeah, some of the presets have been set up in such a way that they might be a bit confusing to people using the app for the first time who just don't understand, you know, I've selected this preset, why am I not getting any noise? A bit weird. The only other real criticism that I would make is the thing that I mentioned a few times through the video, where it's not always clear what is clickable and what is not, i.e. what is a button and what is just a label. But like I said earlier in the video, I spoke to Igor about that, and he agrees that that could be made more clear. So expect that to get improved. And yeah, the only thing that I didn't look at is the one that I forgot. So you're just going to have to check that yourself. I remember Igor telling me this was a cool one to play with, mix on and mix off. But I just can't remember what it does, and I don't want to waste my time or your time now experimenting in case I don't get any understandable results from it. And this video has been very long anyway, and the app has probably just hit the App Store now, if the time is what I think it is. So anyway, overall, listen, very cool app. Yeah, I'm very curious actually what the price for this will be. For such a complex app, I mean, I could easily imagine a $20 price tag. I've no idea whether there will be an intro price or anything like that. But I think like this is definitely a must-buy for people who are interested in experimental stuff. And, you know, Igor is really great at modeling sound of analog gear. You know, his FX apps, for example, like Vintage Rack and stuff like that, or Classic FX, you know, the quality of the effects in them are so good. I mean, you couldn't really hear that today because mostly I was demoing them as like using them as part of the feedback loop, right? But, you know, everything is very high quality sound-wise. So, yeah, I'm really, like, now that I finally understand this app, again, you know, thanks to Igor clarifying some things for me. I mean, I just really did not want to read through this manual because I did start reading through it, and you know, I spent about an hour one day and I felt I really hadn't got very far in the manual, and I was just having to try everything out, and it was just so kind of painstaking. So again, you know, huge thanks to Igor for yeah, getting me up to speed on some of the stuff that I wasn't clear about. It was really nice to get that. Okay, so I hope there's nothing important that I've left out. I don't think there is. I think this has been pretty thorough. As I said, there are some things that I intentionally left out, like some things related to settings or some stuff about the preset menu, but that's all there in the manual for you to check. So if you're still here, fair play to you for staying to the end. Do remember, everyone, I make almost nothing from YouTube, and I really mean that. It's almost nothing. So if you have the financial means, and if you feel that you know, often watch this channel, then why not make a donation? I recently added my Buy Me a Coffee page, and there's my PayPal as well. Buy Me a Coffee is nice because you don't need to make an account. You just, you know, connect through Stripe or whatever, or you can use Google Pay or Apple Pay. And another thing is that on my on my Buy Me a Coffee page, I have the option for you to buy one-to-one voice or video lessons with me, or consultations, or whatever you want to call them. And I did one of those just shortly after setting that page up, and it was a great experience. And I've got another one booked actually with a developer who wants to talk about, you know, how he could improve various aspects of his app and some other things like that. So yeah, remember that that's there as, I think, a very useful resource, not just for, you know, viewers, but also for developers. Thanks for watching, everyone, and enjoy the app. And do remember as well, you know, if you do like the app, make sure you give the dev a review on the App Store. It's really shameful, I think, how few iOS musicians bother to write reviews. You know, they go on in forums constantly about how much they love this dev and so on. I mean, it's a bit the same with YouTubers, for example. You know, people don't really put their money where their mouth is. Very few people donate to YouTubers, and very few people bother to write reviews or even just give a rating for the devs that they, you know, profess to love in the places like the Audiobus forum and so on. Why? You know, if you like a dev, you really got to understand writing reviews, giving them ratings, even just a couple of lines, you know, great app, love it, whatever. It really makes a difference to those devs. So yeah, support the devs you like, and support the YouTubers you like, because both iOS developing and iOS YouTubing are brutal, particularly iOS YouTubing, to be honest. So yeah, go and, you know, after you buy the app and play around with it a bit, if you like it, go and give Igor a good review and a good rating. Anyway, I'll quit rambling on here. Go and enjoy your evening or your day or whatever time zone you're in, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, folks.